My name is Sienna Carter. I was 29 when my mother decided throwing me out was not enough. She wanted witnesses. When I pulled into her driveway that Saturday to pick up my last box, a vinyl banner hung over the garage. Goodbye, freeloader. Don't come back. Country music blasted from a cheap speaker. Pennants ran along the fence like a summer cookout. The grill was going. Neighbors stood around with paper plates. I sat in my car with both hands on the steering wheel, listening to laughter before I even opened the door. My Uncle Rob staggered into view, red-faced, beer in hand, and shouted that maybe now my mother could stop feeding a grown woman who had never built a real career. Someone laughed. Then something soft and greasy hit the side of my car and slid down the door. My brother Tate was doubled over near the cooler. He pointed at the hot dog smeared on the paint and yelled that was my last free meal. Even the neighbor kids laughed, because children learn quickly what cruelty adults approve of. My mother Dana turned from the grill with tongs in one hand and the smile she wore when she thought she had total control of the room. White shorts, gold hoops, perfect hair. She spread her arms like greeting an honored guest. Look who finally came to collect her junk. I had spent years making their lives easier, and all it took was one banner and a few ugly jokes for them to decide I had always been the burden. That is what toxic families do. They repeat a lie until it stops feeling like a lie. It starts feeling like history. I did not yell. I did not cry. I walked past all of them and into the house. The kitchen still smelled like the expensive lemon cleaner I had bought because my mother liked it but claimed money was tight. My last box sat in the mudroom with a plastic grocery bag on top. Inside were instant noodles, dryer sheets, a half-used bottle of dish soap, and a printed list of local apartments. A note said, "Starter kit." It was so childish, I almost laughed. What struck me most was not the cruelty but the effort. They had planned the details. They had staged my humiliation. I picked up the box and walked back out. The yard fell into that hungry half-silence people get when they think the real show is about to start. Rob raised his beer and said something about my late father being ashamed if he could see me now. That was the only line that cut because he knew exactly where the knife went. My father had been dead 8 years. Rob smiled while he said it. Tate laughed and grabbed another hot dog like he was considering throwing a second one. My mother stood there with her tongs, chin up, letting it happen. In a toxic family, leadership is often just permission for everyone else to be as cruel as they want. I set the box in my trunk. Then I pulled out my phone, turned toward the garage, and took one clear photo. The banner. My mother by the grill. Rob on the patio. Tate near the cooler. The neighbors smiling in that careful way people do when they want the fun of witnessing something ugly without taking responsibility for it. My mother saw me and frowned. "What is that for?" "Your pity diary." I looked straight at her and spoke for the first time since arriving. "No. For later." Then I got in my car and left. They were still laughing when I turned the corner. They thought they had just filmed the final scene of my humiliation. What they had actually done was capture the exact second before their safety net drove away. The version my family told everyone was clean and simple. I was almost 30, unmarried, living at home, working from a laptop doing a job none of them respected because none of them understood it. In their version, I had returned home after life failed to launch, stayed too long, contributed too little, and drifted under the roof of a generous woman until she finally set a boundary. The truth was less flattering to the people telling it. 3 years earlier, my mother's event rental company had started bleeding money she would never admit to. Carter Celebrations provided folding chairs, linens, centerpieces, tent packages, portable bars, and lighting rigs for weddings, church events, and corporate mixers across Tampa and the surrounding suburbs. From the outside, it looked healthy. The trucks had decals. The warehouse had a polished reception area. My mother dressed sharply and could talk for 20 minutes without saying anything useful, which many people mistake for leadership. But inside, the business was chaos held together by denial. Inventory constantly miscounted. Deposits logged inconsistently. Vendor bills paid late and blamed on clerical errors. One manager quit after being blamed for a scheduling disaster that was actually my mother's fault. Insurance paperwork kept lapsing. The company software ran on old passwords and backup cards she could never remember. One warehouse lease was 2 months from default by the time I found it. I worked remotely as an operations and contracts coordinator. I helped small businesses organize vendor paperwork, fix broken bidding processes, clean up service agreements, track compliance deadlines, and catch administrative mistakes that cost real money. I was good at systems. I saw breakdowns early. That made me valuable to strangers and almost invisible to my family. My mother saw me working from a laptop in a quiet room and decided my labor was less real than hers. If she could not see sweat, it did not count. I only meant to help temporarily. She asked me to look at some invoices after the billing girl quit. I fixed one overdue account, then found a delivery contract with incorrect pricing, then noticed several deposits recorded without being properly reserved, then discovered a truck operating under insurance about to expire. Every time I fixed one thing, 2 more surfaced behind it. My mother hated admitting she needed help, so she minimized what I did instead. If I corrected a client's wrong quantities before they canceled, she told people I mostly answered emails. If I built a spreadsheet showing which packages were profitable, she said I liked organizing things. If I covered a rushed vendor payment to save a Friday setup, she shrugged and said families help families. That line came up constantly. Families help families. A beautiful sentence, as long as nobody asked why it only applied when my time, money, and stability were the things being taken. I paid more than people knew. Software renewals when accounts declined. A warehouse utility balance to prevent a lockout because she said she would handle it and forgot. Replacement linen costs after an event returned items stained beyond salvage. Fuel money when a truck needed to leave at dawn and the company card kept declining. Rent money to Tate twice because my mother said cash flow was weird. He never repaid me. Neither did any of them. My grandmother Elise disguised every insult as concern. Dana is only trying to teach you responsibility. Tate is young. Rob means well when he is sober. I was always expected to translate their behavior into something softer. That is one of the secret jobs toxic families assign. Somebody has to keep the story from sounding as ugly as it is. It usually lands on the person they also resent the most. The more I helped, the less visible my effort became. My mother would joke that I played Office on my computer and then call me at 11 at night because the warehouse staff had loaded the wrong linens and a wedding planner was threatening to drop them. The truth she never told anyone was simple. If I had not been there, the company would have collapsed years earlier. What changed everything was the moment I realized she no longer viewed me as hidden support she resented needing. She genuinely believed her own story. She believed the roof over my head erased every dollar I had poured into that house and business. She believed that because I had never invoiced her, my labor counted as love and therefore required no acknowledgement. She believed she had carried me. And once she believed that deeply enough, humiliating me in public became not just acceptable, but righteous. That was the week I stopped trying to be understood and started building a record. I made documentation. My revenge did not begin with screaming. It began with spreadsheets, bank statements, saved texts, account histories, and old emails I had kept only because I never fully trusted chaos. I built a timeline going back almost 30 months. Every shortfall I covered. Every subscription renewal I paid when the company card declined. Every rush replacement. Every software fee. Every utility save. Every vendor deposit I fronted. Every message from Rob begging for gas money. Every text from Tate saying he was short this month. Then I tracked unpaid labor. Hours spent rewriting contracts, cleaning client communication, resolving double bookings, fixing inventory errors, rebuilding install sheets, catching permit and insurance issues. Reorganizing vendor accounts my mother had turned into a maze of partial payments and personal excuses. I did not exaggerate. That mattered to me. I wanted conservative numbers because people like my mother always latch onto the slightest rounding error to discredit the whole truth. The total made me stare at the screen for a full minute without moving. Business support alone had crossed $94,000. Direct family support pushed it past $107,000. And even that was incomplete because unpaid labor is always undervalued when the person doing it is the daughter instead of a consultant. Around that same time, a client in North Carolina offered me a longer contract. Better rates. Bigger scope. Enough to rent my own place. I signed before telling anyone. I found a one-bedroom apartment outside Charlotte. Nothing fancy. Clean complex. In-unit washer and dryer. A balcony with room for a chair and a plant. The kind of place you choose not because it impresses anyone, but because your nervous system recognizes quiet when it sees it. I moved my things out in small batches over weeks. Winter coats. Kitchen items I had bought myself. My office monitor. Personal files. By the time my mother cornered me in the kitchen with her official announcement, most of what mattered to me was already gone. She chose a Wednesday morning. Cruelty delivered on weekdays feels more responsible. She walked in with coffee and that controlled expression people wear when they want credit for behavior that would sound monstrous if described honestly. She talked about boundaries, about personal growth, about how no respectable man wanted a woman who still leaned on her mother at 29. She said she loved me too much to keep enabling me. That line almost made me admire her. Real talent, dressing vanity up as sacrifice. I let her finish. Then I asked one question. Do you want me gone, or do you want to show when I leave? The smirk at the corner of her mouth told me everything. Maybe both, she said. That was the moment the last of my guilt disappeared. She did not want resolution. She wanted spectacle. So I nodded like a woman too ashamed to fight and said fine. By Friday evening, I finished the quiet work. I removed my card from every backup billing account I had quietly attached to company systems. I disconnected my login from their scheduling platform. I forwarded vendor emails without cleaning up my mother's rude phrasing. I sent a planner the incomplete file sitting in drafts instead of the polished version I would normally have assembled. I did not sabotage anything. I simply stopped preventing consequences. That distinction mattered. After I left, the silence did exactly what I expected. They believed their own story for 3 days. Then the structure started failing. Monday afternoon, a venue warned that the insurance file on record had expired and suspended deliveries. Tuesday, the scheduling software went dark because the backup card had been removed and the main card declined. Without that software, they were juggling delivery dates, return counts, and setup windows through old text threads and handwritten scraps. Wednesday morning, my mother called at 7, her voice soft enough to fool a stranger. Honey, there is some confusion with the warehouse account and maybe the venue insurance file. I think your card might still be attached somewhere. Confusion. Not thanks. Not any acknowledgement of what I had been doing for years. Just confusion. Thursday, Rob left a voicemail swearing he had not meant what he said at the barbecue, then asked whether I could spot the company enough to get through the weekend. It is always everyone when the target stops absorbing the damage. Friday, Tate called in a voice stripped of all swagger. He needed rent money. Mom could not help. Business was weird. I asked whether he knew why. He did not answer. Instead, he asked what exactly I had been paying for. I sent one crop screenshot. His rent twice, warehouse electric, fuel, vendor software, one linen replacement order. Underneath I wrote, since everyone is suddenly interested in contribution. He went silent for hours. Then texted, what is this? I answered, a sample. The next morning my mother called 6 times before lunch. By the 6th voicemail she was openly begging me to explain what I had turned off. If this is some kind of lesson, she said, fine. Lesson learned. Call me. That was when I printed the full packet. 34 pages. Clean, dated, indexed. A cover page with categories and totals. A timeline stretching back over 2.5 years. Separate sections for business support, household expenses, personal transfers to family members, unpaid labor estimates, and emergency interventions. At the end, I placed one photo. The banner over the garage. My mother by the grill. Rob on the patio. Tate midlaugh. My grandmother Elise left a voicemail after church saying bitterness would poison my spirit. She said counting money after giving it was ugly and unladylike. She said if I had truly been generous, I would not be keeping score now. I called her back not because I expected honesty, but because I wanted a witness to what I would say. You're right, I told her. Generosity does not keep score. Accounting does. She said I should not speak this way about family. I asked whether family was the word for people who laughed under a banner calling me a freeloader while standing on a system partly funded by me. She did not answer. None of them ever did. An hour later, Tate texted, "Talk now." I replied, "Monday, noon, public place." My mother responded almost instantly, "Home." The speed told me everything. She still thought private space was an advantage. No, I typed. You wanted an audience when I left. You can have one when you ask why. We met at a diner near the interstate. My mother arrived early. Rob came with her because men like him never believe a woman is serious until another man is there to absorb the shock. Neither of them ordered food. I sat across from them and slid the packet forward. My mother opened it with the confidence of someone expecting emotional nonsense. That confidence disappeared fast. Her eyes dropped to the total and snapped back up at me so quickly it looked like the number had slapped her. Rob leaned over, scanned the first page, and muttered something under his breath that sounded almost like a prayer. Dates. Line items. Bank references. Software invoices. Utility payments. Vendor deposits. Screenshots of texts asking for help. Notes on insurance filings I had corrected. Details on bookings I had salvaged. Conservative estimates of hours spent rewriting customer communication after my mother had rushed through them. She flipped a page too hard and said the numbers were inflated. I asked which part. She jabbed at a software charge and said that was for the business, not for her. Yes, I said. Your business. She moved through the packet trying to find holes. The fuel transfers were temporary. I said 3 times over 3 months. The labor estimate was subjective. I said extremely conservative, and if I had billed at standard consultant rates the number would be much higher. Rob had gone visibly pale. My mother tried the defense I expected. Families help each other. That does not make this a debt. I held her gaze. When I lived in your house, you called it freeloading. When you lived off my money and labor, it became family. Her mouth tightened. She told me not to do this here. I asked whether she meant with witnesses. Rob tried an apology that had clearly been practiced in the car. I looked at him and said he had not apologized when he sobered up. He apologized when the accounts started failing. My mother changed tactics. Even if you helped more than we knew, you were still living in my house at 29. There it was. The roof as moral eraser. Shelter as justification for every insult. I leaned back and answered calmly. If I had paid market rent to a stranger and kept my money away from your company, you would have lost that warehouse a long time ago. If I had billed you for what I fixed, you would not still be operating. The only reason you got to call me a freeloader is because I loved you quietly. That hit harder than the total. I could see it in the shift of her shoulders. Not guilt. Recognition. Truth in a sentence too clean to dodge. She flipped to the final page and saw the photograph. Her posture changed immediately. Not remorse. Calculation. You took this for leverage? No, I said. I took it because I knew you would lie about how bad it was. Rob rubbed both hands over his face. So what now? What do you want? It never occurred to them I might not want anything from them anymore. Nothing, I said. I am not here to negotiate. I am here so you cannot pretend later that you had no idea what I was carrying. My mother stared at me, then asked the real question. How much of this can you turn back on? Not are you okay? Not we were wrong. Operations. She wanted to know what systems could be revived and how quickly. I answered honestly because honesty had become a kind of freedom. The warehouse can stay on if you pay it today. The truck insurance will cost more because the lapse already triggered penalties. At least 2 planners are reconsidering because nobody was there to rewrite your emails. She looked wounded by that in a way she had not looked wounded by the money. My mother always cared most about image. She accused me of enjoying the situation. I told her I would have enjoyed being respected before it got here. Then she tried softness. Life had been hard since my father died. She had carried too much and made mistakes. We did not need to sit in a diner like enemies. There was a version of me from 2 years earlier who might have softened. The current version had receipts. We are sitting here like enemies, I said, because you threw a party when you thought you no longer needed me. She asked if I wanted an apology. I said no. Distance. That offended her more deeply than any request for repayment would have. Then she did what controlling parents always do when they lose direct power. She widened the circle of guilt. Tate, Grandma, Rob, the employees. Their needs were meant to flow back into my body as obligation. I took a second envelope from my bag and placed it beside the packet. Inside were names and numbers. 2 accountants, a small business attorney, a bookkeeping service, an insurance broker, a utility assistance program. She frowned. What is that? Resources, I said. That is all I am offering. I stood up. My mother made one final attempt to regain status. If you walk out now, do not expect to come back when things turn around. I picked up my keys and looked down at her. The only reason things ever turned around in that family was because I was standing behind you holding the weight. Then I left. When you stop being the hidden support beam in a toxic family, the collapse happens in installments. First the confusion, then the blame, then the bargaining, then the rewrite attempts. My mother moved through all 4 within a month. She emailed a week after the diner with the subject line, "Transitional Support Proposal." Inside was an offer for a 90-day contractor arrangement to stabilize operations while the company reorganized. Compensation to be discussed once cash flow improved. She added it would also give us a chance to rebuild trust. I answered in 4 sentences. I am not returning. I am not providing unpaid or deferred labor. Do not contact me for business support again. Any future communication must be respectful and personal only. Her response came 12 minutes later. So you will just watch your mother lose everything. That sentence contained the deepest hook she had ever lodged in me. Children like me are trained to believe a parent's collapse is our moral emergency. For a few minutes, I felt the old reflex rise. Explain. Sue. Offer one last practical fix. Then I thought about the banner. The hot dog on my car door. Rob using my dead father as a punchline. Tate laughing. My mother watching with satisfaction. I wrote back one final time. You are not losing everything because I left. You are losing everything because you built a life that only worked while someone you humiliated kept carrying it. She never replied to that message directly. The fallout came through everyone else. My grandmother mailed me a casserole dish I had left years earlier. No note. No apology. Just the dish wrapped in newspaper, as if returning borrowed glassware restored moral order. I laughed so hard I had to sit down on the floor. 2 days later, Tate showed up at my Charlotte apartment without warning. He looked exhausted and smaller somehow, stripped of the swagger he usually wore like armor. For 10 minutes, he talked in circles. Mom is under pressure. Rob is messing everything up. Grandma says the house feels cursed. I let him talk until he ran out of excuses. Then he looked at me and said the sentence that mattered. I was awful to you. No flourish. No self-pity. Just the words. He admitted he had known I was helping more than anyone said. He just had not wanted to know how much, because that would have forced him to see our mother differently. He said mocking me kept the attention off him. When I was in the house, I was the shock absorber. My presence drew most of her disappointment, anger, and contempt. Once I left, she started turning it on everyone else. I asked if he had ever truly believed I was freeloading. He looked down at his hands and said no. He knew I was doing more than I got credit for. He just thought it would be easier for everyone if he kept pretending otherwise. Cowardly, honest, human. I let him stay one night on the couch. In the morning he left for an interview and texted later to say thank you. First time in years he had thanked me for anything without following it with a request. My mother, meanwhile, was losing ground fast. The warehouse lease had to be renegotiated. One truck got sidelined after the insurance lapse triggered a review. A major wedding planner reduced bookings after 2 setup errors and a rude email sent without me to soften it. One warehouse staff member quit, tired of being blamed for inventory mistakes nobody had properly tracked. The company did not shut down overnight, but the illusion of control did. And once that illusion cracked, people around my mother started realizing how much of her authority had always depended on someone cleaning behind her. North Carolina suited me better than Florida ever had. One client contract became two. Referrals turned into a waiting list. I formed an LLC. I rewrote my service structure so deposits were upfront and communication boundaries were clear. No midnight rescues. No unpaid emergency fixes without signed terms. When people respected my work, my skills became more valuable, not less. I rented a better apartment after 6 months. Bought a used Subaru in cash. Put herbs on the balcony. Then one day my mother called from an unknown number. The first thing she said was that she was not calling about money, which told me she knew exactly what I would assume. She said she had found one of my father's recipe cards while cleaning a drawer and thought I might want it. It was the first thing she had offered me in years that was not wrapped around a demand. I told her she could mail it. There was a long silence before she asked quietly if I really thought she was that cruel. I could have answered a dozen ways. Instead, I said only one sentence. "You hung it over the garage, Mom." She exhaled like a person finally forced to see herself without flattering angles. The recipe card arrived 4 days later. My father's handwriting slanted across an index card browned at the edges. A chili recipe. A note at the bottom read, "Less salt if Dana is in one of her moods." I laughed so suddenly I cried. Then I put the card in a frame and set it on my shelf where I could see it from the kitchen. People still ask whether I regret not helping one last time. The question sounds compassionate, but it hides the same old trap. It assumes the most moral person in any story is the one who sacrifices again. I do not believe that anymore. If someone calls you family only when they need your labor, your money, or your silence, they are not protecting a relationship. They are protecting a system. If a parent requires you to stay small so they can feel confident, that is not love. If a whole backyard can laugh while you are humiliated and then panic the moment your support disappears, the panic tells the truth more clearly than any apology ever could. I was never the freeloader. I was the unpaid operations manager, the hidden payroll, the midnight fix, the quiet reason the lights stayed on. My mother's greatest mistake was not throwing that barbecue. It was believing the daughter she humiliated would still return once the bills came due. Rob sent me one final message on New Year's Eve. "You were right." No punctuation. No apology. Just that. I did not answer. Tate and I speak now carefully. Not like movie siblings who hug through years of damage and emerge instantly healed. More like two adults testing whether honesty can grow where convenience and cruelty used to live. He moved out. Got steadier work. Calls sometimes with practical questions. I answer when I choose. That distinction matters more than most people realize. I still have the photo from the driveway. The banner over the garage, smoke from the grill, my mother in white shorts, Rob on the patio, Tate mid-laugh, all of them certain they were documenting my humiliation. What they actually captured was the final second before the person holding up their fragile little world got in her car and drove away. I do not regret leaving. I regret staying long enough to confuse being useful with being loved. I regret every time I translated their cruelty into stress. Every time I called neglect exhaustion. Every time I let shelter erase debt in my own mind. But I will never regret the photo, the silence, the packet, the distance, or the day she begged 2 weeks later. By then it was already too late.